Hello and welcome to another episode of Dear Future CRO, brought to you by GrowthQ and Culture Crunch. I'm thrilled to be joined firstly with my esteemed co-host, founder and CEO of GrowthQ, Esther Iyamu. And on behalf of Esther and I, we are so thrilled and humbled to be joined by the highly regarded Kelly O'Kay. Kelly's a co-founder of the Sales Officer Practice at Heidrick Struggles, who specializes in sales leadership roles within the tech space. Kelly, welcome.
Karen, nice to meet you. Thank you, Esther. Good to see you both.
Yes, we are so excited for this conversation. As you know, we are focused on helping the future CROs get ready for that big role. And Kelly, you're it. You play some of the greatest and biggest named CROs across the tech industry, across the sales industry. And so we are so excited for you to share your knowledge with our group. First question we've got to ask you is, how did you get here? You've done all the things, CMO, COO, you co-founded the CRO practice. You've done so many incredible things. Can you share with us a bit about your journey?
I'm going to have my wife listen to this to make sure she. So my journey in the search profession, I've been here going on 20 years. I've run the global software practice for nearly 19. I carried a bag. I started my career much like many of in the audience. I started my career right out of college in sales with IBM. And that was when IBM actually was a company that they invested in sales training. So it was very lucky to get started in that company at that time. When I joined Heidrick, it became really obvious that this was the function for me because it's where I started my career. So I resonate with this audience that's listening because I was what they are right now. And although I'm not a CRO myself, I could never probably do that job. So I have a lot of respect for the people that do that job. I do place many of them, as you said. There's an enormous demand for this talent in this market right now. And as Karen, you had said early on, and Esther, you said, my focus for the audience is really largely tech, which I understand this audience listening is going to be largely tech. But hopefully some of the things that we talk about will apply to everybody, whether you're in the tech sector or not. For me, it was just literally because I started in that function, and I specialize now in it it's like the coach, if you will. Someone who can't do can coach. I can coach, but I can't do.
Well, you've done quite a bit in this industry. You've been published in Forbes, Wall Street Journal, CNBC. You've collaborated and co-authored articles with the Harvard Business Review. I could keep going. We could just keep going here. But, over the 2 decades that you've been recruiting for this role, the role has evolved. The role has changed, which I would imagine as the coach and the person that has to find that talent, it's also changed for you. So maybe can you talk about how the role of the CRO has changed and then how that's evolved for you as in your role?
Dramatically evolved. It used to be, as we all know, the role of a sales leader was typically seen as somebody that probably largely seen as male, probably largely seen as white, probably largely seen as somebody that took clients out to dinner and played golf and all of the things that come to mind for all of us when we think about that old sales leader. That was how deals got done. That's how transactions got done back in the day, whenever that was. And that clearly was the way it was when I started 20 years ago doing this. It's just to fast forward to give you a comparison. Today, that just doesn't happen. It may happen selectively, but fortunately, we're at a place now where there are lots of diverse leaders. There's a huge amount in the funnel coming up, but it's really more about today managing in a modern way. And what a modern way is looking at data. We're in a world of data, and we're all talking about generative AI today and ChatGPT. It's an amazing transformation of where it's come from and what it is today. So everybody has gotten much more specialized, depending on what sector you're in, what segment you're talking about within that sector, how you go to market, whether it's through channels or direct or call center or freemium. There's so many different routes to market, so many different segments, so many different geos, so many different products that the specialization has just become enormous. And you have to be today somebody that really understands metrics, conversions, and just the use of data. And that's really the big thing. It's that's changed probably the most dramatic.
It sounds like, just listening to you, Kelly, that obviously there have been changes within market trends as well as roles and responsibility pertaining to this space. Something that Esther and I discuss a lot is how sort of the CROs interface with the board, but also how that dynamic and that relationship has changed over recent years. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah, it used to be that go-to-market leaders, 20 years ago, you'd be hard-pressed to find a go-to-market leader on a board of directors. So it typically wasn't the functional leaders that were on a board of directors 20 years ago. It used to be just CEOs, professional board members, maybe CFOs, but it was very rare to find CROs on boards. Today, what's happened, again, just fast forward now to the world that we're in today, not only do you find CROs on boards today, but you also find them in private equity firms as operating advisors, in venture capital firms as operating advisors. So this, again, the theme of specialization has just become continued with more career choices now for the best CROs, where they go with their career after they're done with their operating career. They can go into a board, they can go into a private equity or venture firm. But the relationship, to your question, Kieran, between the CRO and the board, they may have been invited to board meetings in the past, say 20 years ago, to present a piece of a board agenda. Today, they're in the board meeting, they're in the entire board meeting. The go-to-market function today is so critical with the headwinds that almost every company in the world, whether you're tech or non-tech, has, which is the operating environment today is brutal out there. Ask any sales leader, especially in the tech sector, and they'll tell you it is a street fight every day for winning deals, winning new clients, new logos, converting, renewing, etc. So the board has a fiduciary responsibility to understand it, but CEOs now are much more willing to get their CRO in the board meeting with them versus it used to be they would either speak for the CRO or invite them to a piece of the agenda and then leave.
It's so interesting to see that evolution and how much that's changed. I almost think there's now, I would imagine now, when preparing or recruiting the CRO, there's new conversations being had with the CRO to prepare them for that, as well as to prepare the board and team. Can you maybe share about what that looks like?
Because now CROs are going to these board meetings much more often, and they're not being their narrative is not being used by the CEO to speak for them. Remember, CROs are on the boards themselves now, so there's a familiarity and a discussion that takes place at the board meeting where boards have become much more in tune with all of the terms and all of the issues around go-to-market. Everybody has gotten educated because it's an incredibly competitive landscape out there. It's no longer a single market leader with 2 or 3, followers that are far away from a market share perspective. Almost any segment that you look at has lots of competitors, and it's very fragmented, and it is an incredibly dynamic environment right now. So what I find is boards have become much more aggressive and much more involved in the go-to-market decisions and discussion at the board meeting than in the past, where it may have been much more a steady state environment. Think about the world that we're in. Things are changing so rapidly, so often, that you may have the best plan that you just as a board approved, only to find out the banks just collapsed, or whatever the latest new thing that just happened in the world just occurred. Like, everybody is constantly reinventing themselves in the world because, as we all know, not a single person on this planet has ever seen the world that we're in today. 20 years ago, it used to be fairly predictable. Earnings announcements came on a certain cycle, and and the markets operated a certain way, and everybody could kind of predict the way things were going to work out. Today, the volatility is just extreme. And so I think that's probably what's caused a lot of the boards and go-to-market leaders to be so engaged, because it's just an very uncertain environment.
That leads really nicely on to the next question, Kelly. So talking about, I think the word you used was dynamic. It's an incredibly dynamic landscape at the moment, and also, volatile for so many different reasons. With that in mind, what advice do you think, or no, not advice, what do you wish CROs knew that they know now that they didn't know 20 years ago? What's that nugget of advice?
Yeah, it's what every CEO is looking for in this environment, and it's whether you're a $50 million company or a $300 million company or a $3 billion company or a $20 billion. It's almost agnostic of size of company. Everyone's looking for predictable, repeatable, consistent results. Easy to say, really hard to do, because there's, to what we just said, there's so much volatility with this market. It's the companies, because the companies that can produce consistent, repeatable, scalable sort of results are going to get the best valuations, because they're the ones investors can trust and rely on. The ones that they're up and they're down, and they meet guidance, they take guidance down, they raise, they're all over the board. It's just less predictable, and from an investor standpoint, there's just going to be less value placed on them. So I think there's that element from a results and a performance standpoint. The number one thing every CEO says to me, looking for a head of sales, whether it's the title is president. In today's, by the way, in today's world, at least in the tech sector, the title president is sometimes used to be CRO. Sometimes it used to have meaning. And today the meaning has been a little bit lost, because there's lots of titles that never occurred 20 years ago that all sort of mean the same thing. Depending on which company you're talking about, you could be a chief growth officer, a chief customer officer, chief commercial officer, but they're all kind of the same. But from a style standpoint, Kieran, the number one thing that everyone looks for is self-awareness, authenticity, no ego. I mean, the style of how you get the results we just talked about matter. So 20 years ago, again, you could imagine somebody that made their numbers or made their quota or made the quota that they were given, but nobody wanted to work with them. And that just doesn't exist anymore. How you get those results in today's world matters a lot. Are you retaining, hiring, training, promoting diverse talent? Are you lifting everybody up? Our teams, do they want to work for you? Will they follow you? That style and that culture of how you get the results is really what is kind of defines a modern leader. Because if you're managing with a stick, nobody's going to follow you. It's really the carrot that everybody wants.
You shared something that stood out really, really well to me. There's almost two sides of what a CRO has to look for. There is predictability, focus on the data, make sure you're communicating the data. But there's also the soft skills of, the relationship, being self-aware, having no ego, being vulnerable enough to know your strengths versus your weaknesses, and being open. I'd love to get your perspective about that, because that affects key relationships across, within your organization, with your peers, with the board, with CEO, for folks in this role. Can you talk about the most critical relationships and stakeholders that's important to continue to build over time? If you think of the, VP that's listening to this, or sales director that's listening to this, who has that aspiration, if they want to stay within their company, for example, they've got to build that today. So can you talk about what relationships are really critical for that sales leader?
That's a really good question. I mean, you're a super successful operating exec, Esther. You've seen it firsthand. You've lived it yourself. It's I would argue that it's every relationship. And I don't know if I could put one is more important than the other. What I will tell you, and what I share, I have 6 kids. I think, Esther, you and I have chatted about it. 4 of them are AEs in tech companies. So I've given them the same advice. I was just back in working with some of our up-and-coming consultants and partners a few weeks ago and sharing this advice. The number one thing I would say to anybody listening to this podcast about their development journey, I'll call it the development journey, and this is around self-awareness, authenticity, et cetera. is demand feedback from people that you work with. And I say that because there's a difference between being open to feedback and demanding feedback. If you demand feedback, it's not going to be heard as criticism, or I'm putting you down, or I'm being tough on you. It's going to be heard as development because you want to get better. And that is honestly the number one thing I've seen with all of the leaders that I have come in contact with, whether it's at Heidrick or internally, it's getting that feedback internally of what could I have done better, no matter what level, whether you're an entry level, you're a first line manager, second line manager, first VP, even a CRO. I mean, demand feedback. Nobody has all the answers. Work very seamlessly across an organization. I mean, sales leaders, in my opinion, the best sales leaders again, I'm speaking more on the tech side, but this applies to outside of tech. Get to know the engineering people, get to know the product people, get to know your peers across the organization that are all working to develop together to deliver a solution that's value add for your clients. And the more knowledge you can have about the assets of your company rather than just I'm selling, the better. And so when you do that, you're probably going to make some mistakes because you're living in a world that you're not familiar with, whether it's engineering or product or whatever. So ask for feedback, demand it, and just say, how could I have done that better? I guarantee you it kind of works magic when you do that, because people will see you as self-aware when you do that, because they'll realize by symbolically what you're saying is I don't have all the answers. And when you don't take it as criticism by talking then behind their back, so-and-so said this, when they see you take it proactively and do something with it constructively, it's sort of a reassuring self-development journey, and it will help in all types of relationships.
So true.
I think that's phenomenal advice that transcends industry parameters as well. I think that applies to literally everyone in every role at every level. If we can, so just to pivot specifically now, Kelly, to individuals that are really wanting to forge a successful career in the go-to-market space, we've talked about, demanding feedback, but what else do you think individuals can do that are watching right now that will really help facilitate them securing that successful career?
We'll talk about it, I think, again, a little bit later, but one of the strongest correlations I've noticed in what I do between people who have successful careers in sales or really any of the functions is get a mentor, get sponsored, get a mentor. And the reason it's just, and when I say get a mentor, I'm not referring to your dad or your uncle, your cousin, or like somebody that you know that's a good family friend. I'm talking about somebody that you aspire to be. If you aspire to be a CRO, get a CRO mentor of a company that you aspire to be at. And by definition, if you have a mentor, somebody that is in the role today, they're going to give you the best advice on the learnings of what it took. I mean, the audience listening to this is what we've talked about is a diverse next generation of diverse CROs in this industry or in all industries. And find those, it doesn't have to be the CRO. Find somebody that is 2 or 3 levels above you, but on the path that you're on the journey that you're on, and get them that correlation, because they will have made a lot of the mistakes that you're going to make and you probably just made. They're going to be able to help you navigate and ask for feedback. Again, this feedback theme will keep coming up throughout this discussion. Go find those people. What I often hear when I ask who's your mentor, who's your sponsor, I'll hear things that are kind of irrelevant, like somebody that ran a dry cleaning store, or some completely irrelevant to what they're trying to do. I get they may be great people, and I'm not discounting that, and there's a place for it. But from a career development standpoint, just find the mentor. That's probably number one. Number two is, the good news right now, I will inject this, which is everybody listening to this is on the sales journey. But today, there's so many other options other than sales. 2 of my daughters started out as SDRs on the sales side and then found out sales wasn't for them, and they shifted over to customer success. There's so many other functions today that are available: sales enablement, rev ops, customer success, sales, and every one of them has a different success profile of who is probably going to be best fit for each of those kind of functional areas. So just because anybody listening to this is starting out their career in sales, and then it may not work out, there's lots of other options today. So I will say, be authentic to you. Don't stay in a function that's not fit for purpose. If you're not fit for a net new logo number and starting zero every day, every week, every month, every year, go find one of the other functions that you can still be a go-to-market leader. It's just a different type of go-to-market leader. So that would be something I would say as keep an eye on.
I love that you mentioned the different types of roles that are within sales. We harp on this a ton within GrowthQ in our community. We separate, I want to say separate, but we allow people to identify in our community with different types of sales roles because it's different muscles depending on what sits with you. If you're the technical person, the specialist or the sales engineer might be right. If you love the numbers and love digging into the data and optimizing, RevOps, to your point, or sales optimization or operations or enablement might be great for you. If you love the hunt to go find that net new logo, a hunter sales role, getting in front, going and finding new logos might be for you. If you hate the hunt, but you love deep, connected relationships and really understanding customer problems, farming might be for you. But the key point to what you shared is just understanding what works for you and being authentic to you so you can form at your best independent role.
You said it perfectly. It's as we all know, there are different types of personalities, even on the sales side. There are folks that are big deal people. They love the big deal. They talk about deals all the time. To me, that has to.
I was that person. I was that person.
There is the big deal person. There's the process person that wants to build scalable. There's the dashboard person. There's lots of different types of leaders on the sales side. I mean, the reality is, in my opinion, the person at the CRO level, again, when you're at that level, it's all part of the sales organization. But when you're running, I'm not even going to say the CRO level. Let's just say a region or a product, or you're expected to build a machine so that you're not going to be in that role for 2, 3, 4 years. That's about all you're going to be in that role. So the person that is running the whole organization, they want it to be seamless when you transition out. So build the machine. If you're just a big deal person, that's great for when the company is very small and you're trying to get off the ground. But as you get more mature and the expectations become more predictable, you want to find a way to become more of a process person within the sales organization.
Ooh, such good advice. Such good advice. When I remember first meeting you, Kelly, and we had a conversation. I thought it was going to be 20 minutes. We just kept going because we were just having a ball. And I remember reading through the conversation, your passion around wanting to get more people in the room for that CRO role, and to hear about your commitment to that process and your work around that with McKinsey, for example, to really focus on how do we do that. I can tell your passion was high around helping folks get in that room. I would love to unpack that a bit to scale that expertise and get a little bit more detail on that path to CRO, on how to actually get that job, interview tips, who you're supposed to know. Can you give us a little bit more outside of the onion that you can share with our listeners?
I appreciate you bringing that up. I as you and I chatted, and I loved that first conversation that you and I had. I am 100% on board with just adding more, just ethnic, every type of diversity at the CRO level, at the ELT level, not just CRO level, ELT level. And it's just as much about neurodiversity as anything else. Just somebody that thinks differently than everybody else. By the way, it comes from a couple different things. One, I have 6 kids, 3 are daughters, and all 3 are in tech sales. So they've never been more proud of their dad than when I've placed big female leaders or big diverse leaders as president or CRO of big enterprise tech company. So that was one. But I remember 20 years ago when I'd walk out of a conference room, and you and I chatted about this, Esther. And I'd walk out of interviewing a white male executive, and then walk into a conference room interviewing a female executive, and it was just radically different. The male executives would want to talk about who they knew and how they could compete for the role, and use a lot of familiarity. I know so-and-so and I know so-and-so. Where a female leader at the time, and I'll fast forward it here, would want to tell a long wind-up story and storytell. And neither were right, by the way. Fast forward today, how to tell the story and sort of the career tips. As a CRO, there's only two things that really matter. The very first things that matter: have you made your numbers, and are you somebody we want to work with? Like, nothing else matters until you get through that first gate. And so if you haven't made your numbers, because no CRO, no CEO is going to hire a CRO that hasn't made their numbers. That's just by definition. And number two, then and it's, I don't know if it's one or two or 2 and 1. It's kind of a chicken and the egg, but you have to do it the how again, as we talked about earlier. You have to be that person that is the team that's there. It's going to be inspired by. So being able to stand on stage, being able to motivate a diverse workforce today, it's a vastly different skill set than it was 20 years ago. Being able to be analytical enough to know how to segment and resegment your customer base constantly, because as the market changes and new products come out, you're constantly having to resegment. How to compensate, how to create compensation programs. All of those are the things to keep in mind in today's sort of world as a CRO. But how you tell that story is super important. I tell everybody, what happens is I'll spend 30 minutes with an executive, and they'll spend probably 10 or 15 minutes just answering the very first question of, tell me about you. And they got it completely wrong. So anybody listening to this, anytime you're in an interview, well, 3 things. Number one, if you ever get introduced to somebody in a retained search or in a consulting kind of position, or you get introduced to the company, it's an interview. Just because it was set up, it's a friend introducing you to a friend. Don't ever be confused. It's an interview. I can't tell you how many times I get introduced to people, they get on the call and they're super casual and they don't know their data. I ask a few questions. What was your quota when you went in? What was the size of your business when you went in? And what did you scale it to when you left? And they weren't prepared for it. I mean, basic things. Just so always know your numbers, your data, because if you don't know it, no one on the other side of the table or door or phone is going to know it. So practice telling your story using nothing but data. It's really hard to do. I encourage and I'm going to challenge everybody to do it, because the more words you use, telling me that you're really great, or telling me that you killed something, or telling me that you blew out plan, think about it for a minute. You told me nothing. But if you told me you stepped into a $100 million business and you grew it to 200 million, and the mandate was to grow it to 150 million, well, now you just told me something really powerful. So the framework, I will share this real quick for the audience. The best framework, and this is a framework I give to every one of the senior executives that are running the biggest tech companies in the world, it's the same exact framework. When you tell a story during an interview, there's 4 parts to it. And just write this down and remember this framework. This is a framework for how to tell a story. The first part of the framework is the context. So when somebody says, tell me about whatever, the very first thing you say is give them 1 or 2 pieces of context of what you inherited. So this was a declining business. It was a business that didn't have any leadership, whatever the relevant piece of context is. The second piece of the framework is, what was the mandate? What were you asked to do by the person that hired you? So I was asked to take a $100 million declining business and grow it to 200 million in the next 24 months. Great. The third piece is, fast forward to the result that you achieved. What did you actually achieve? I got to 200 million in 18 months, not 24 months. And then the last part of the framework is one example of what was the most important contributing factor for you to achieve that result you just told me you got. That should take no more than 90 seconds, 2 minutes tops. That's not a 10-minute conversation or a dialogue, because what you don't want to do in an interview is talk at somebody for 5 or 10 minutes. Because if you're only going to be with them for 30 or 45 or an hour, they're going to probably shut down. I mean, think of it, just turn the tables. Do you want to be talked at for 10 minutes? Nobody does.
Kelly, you need to package this, okay? trademark it, sell it, and cut Esther and I in on that.
If this stuff works, I will tell you.
Yeah.
I was just
incredible.
thinking back to all of those times that I've been in that spot, and I'm sure, Esther, you did the same. And I wish I had this formula. That's, really insightful. Thank you for sharing. So we've talked a lot, Kelly, about that kind of the early stages, okay, the interview process. I mean, what advice would you give individuals that are already established but really want to propel their career forward and advance it to that next level? Do you have any, what's your perspective in terms of best practice and lessons learned?
Yeah, great question. So the number one mistake I see a lot of executives make at lots of different levels is that they tell me they can do something that they've never done. And while that seems logical, buyers don't ask. They don't typically want people. They don't want to hire somebody that's never done the job. I mean, I understand we're in a world that we've never seen. I understand all that, but there are certain things that buyers of talent, i.e., the CEO, typically, they want to reduce risk. They want as much upside and they want as little downside. So just remember that constantly as the people listening to this are thinking about interviewing. So when you tell somebody, here, we're going to come back to self-awareness. When you tell me I'm going to interview you for a territory that has $100 million of quota assigned to it, and the biggest quota you've ever done is 20 million, and you say to me, I can do that job, just put me in. I look at you like you're very unself-aware, just so you know. I look at you like, yes, I understand everybody I talk to will say I could do that job. But I want you to think like the buyer of talent is thinking. So when you say what you should say, here's the right answer of what you should say. I understand you're looking for someone that's had $100 million of revenue responsibility. I haven't done that. Just be upfront about it, because it's the big elephant in the room and everybody knows it. Because if you haven't told them you haven't done it yet, they're going to ask one question: have you done it? Then you're going to say no. And that just puts you on the defensive. So admit it. Just put the big elephant in the room. I haven't done 100 million, but here's what I have done. And then list the things that are relevant that you have done to reduce risk for that buyer.
You are bringing up cringy times where I've been that unself-aware sales leader thinking, yeah, I could go in and go do that VP job, no problem, and got rudely awakened when I should have walked into your point and said, you know what, I know I've never done that, but here's what I have done, and here's where I can bring value in the interim, or let's create a path together, right? Such great insights. Oh my gosh, we could go on forever. I have so many more questions for you, but I'm going to keep it to two. One that's really, really important for our listeners, and we talk about this often, is the area around mentorship and sponsorship. I know personally that this is important to you because you've talked about it. There was a CNBC article, Made It. I love CNBC Made It. In 2019, where they quoted your work with the Harvard Business Review, and you talked about, the importance of mentorship in all stages. Now, in this article, specifically talking about getting an offer and deciding between a counter offer, but you specifically mentioned, look, it's really important you get somebody outside of your own mind and head helping you sort through your thoughts here. Can you talk a little bit about the importance of mentorship and the importance of sponsorship and what's important for the CRO to make sure they have?
And you and I have chatted about it. There's a difference between both, and everybody listening, I think, understands the difference between both. Some will be lucky enough to have one or both of those in their career, and others won't. I mean, it's not a right that everybody gets. It's a privilege that you get, and you get the privilege by having a mentor and a sponsor by earning it. It's not something that is bestowed on you or given to you unless you have done your part. So you have to do your part, which your part is there is nobody that a sponsor, a mentor, anybody outside of your family, your association with that person speaks volumes. So if somebody is going to, in this case, sponsor or mentor you, they are associating their brand with your brand. Think about that. And if they're associating their brand that is taking a career to earn, they're not doing it lightly. because they're only doing it for people that will make them look good, or that will be a additive sort of reflection on them, I guess, if you will. So how do you get the mentor or the sponsor? You work your buns off. I mean, I really don't know how else to say it. You have to earn the right, and you have to put in the hours. We all know there's so many days that we go home defeated and sad or angry or whatever the natural human emotion is for a day, during a week, a year, a quarter, whatever. But you have to maintain. This audience is in sales or wants to be in go-to-market, client-facing roles. Yes, you can. It's totally natural and fair to feel all those emotions, but when you show up to work every day, you're positive and you're looking for solutions. And when you do that and you're delivering your numbers and you're showing up early and you're staying late and you're never complaining about the work that you're being asked to deliver and do, people will take notice of that. They want to help people that want to help themselves. That's kind of a natural human instinct that it just works that way. And I call it's my humanisms. This is one of those humanisms that just it transcends every generation, everything, which is, if I see you wanting to help yourself, I'm going to be much more inclined to want to help you. And it may start out small in mentorship, like, hey, here's some suggestions you might want to do. It may become more formal, which is, let's meet quarterly or yearly or whatever. But these are incredibly important and valuable relationships. As I said earlier, it's probably a 1-to-1 correlation, which is as strong a correlation as you can get between success and not success with the further you go up in the organization. By the way, I've written in part of your career journey for everybody listening to this is you're going to change jobs. So what we're talking about is how to get a job, but the opposite of that is you're going to probably have to change jobs, which means you're going to resign a lot during your career. So take a look at the articles that I've authored on how to resign the right way and how it comes up in this context of sponsorship and mentorship. I guarantee anybody listening, they've never taken a class in college or high school or business school on how to resign the right way, how to interview the right way. Nobody has ever been taught. It's just, unfortunately, one of those things in our world where you figure it out and you hope you do the best you can. But if you have a sponsor or a mentor, that is a perfect time before you resign. Say, I'm going to resign. Here's my talk track. What do you think? Give me some feedback. When you're building your career on the interview side, I'm going to go prepare for this company interview. I just got this job. All of those are perfect moments in your career journey to reach out to that sponsor. And guess what? As you continue to be more successful, they're going to want to help even more. So it's one of those, you help yourself and then they help you.
Oh yeah. Such timely context for folks. And look, to your point, showing up and connecting with those folks, doing the work is the first step. And there are great resources out there. Shameless plug. It's why GrowthQ is invented, right? Is you keep showing up and doing the work and jump onto a platform like GrowthQ and connect to someone who knows your journey and wants to get to where you're going. Take that, keep showing up and doing the work, and that person can then keep on showing up to help support you on that journey. So 100%. I love that you shared that context. Okay, Kieran knows I love this last question, or right at the end of the interview. Kieran and I chatted about why we created Dear Future CRO, and it was for the previous Esther. It was for 21-year-old Esther staring down this large $50 billion company before she'd made her first 6 figures, before she'd made her first 7 figures, and was like, okay, how do I do this? And if you could, Kelly, if you're staring down that, whether it's a Kieran or it's an Esther, or it's a Robert, it's a whoever, if you could write that, call it love letter to that person looking at this role and wanting to get there, what would you say? So if you can answer this, Dear Future CRO, how would you finish that sentence?
There's a couple things. I love this question. So I give you guys a lot of credit for ending it this way. Be kind to yourself, number one. Celebrate successes, small successes. They don't have to be big successes. We all have most of us have something nice in our refrigerators, whether it's wine or champagne or fruit juice or whatever it is that you only eat or drink occasionally on the big occasions. Forget that. Celebrate the small ones. Like, enjoy the journey that you're going through. It's just about the journey. It's not about the destination. We're all going to end up where we're supposed to end up. Not all of us are going to be CROs. Not all of us are going to be CEOs. But just enjoy whatever it is. So number one is enjoy the journey. Demand feedback. Like, I wish I would have told myself, like, absolutely demand feedback from others, because naturally when we're young, we're either shy, insecure, not confident, unsure, whatever we are. But what the next generation understands is we all know that you don't know anything. So just ask for it. Like, you don't have to, there's no imposter syndrome. It's okay. Like, we're going to look at you by you being self-aware and asking for feedback. I wish I would have done that myself. I've told all my kids the same feedback. So when I saw your question, I was super excited about it. Help others. Like, this is one where I guarantee you, we haven't used the word differentiation yet at all on this, but if you want to differentiate yourself from your peers, the people that you're competing for that next job, do this. It's very simple. Shine the spotlight on other people. The natural human instinct at this stage of career, where most people listening to this are, I want the attention, I want the accolades, I want the awards, I want the recognition, I want all of that. Find ways to shine that spotlight that you want on you, shine it on others, making people look good. I guarantee you everyone will know who shined the spotlight. So indirectly you get the spotlight, but you are helping to build someone else's career, because remember where everyone listening to this is. Everyone is earlier midpoint in their career journey. Everyone's going to rise and move about and change. It's a chessboard that just constantly is changing. You never know where the people that you are working with side by side today are going to be a year from now, 5 years from now, 10 years from now, 20 years from now. Be super thoughtful, kind to them. Help them if they're struggling. Whether this is the job for them or not, just be that person, because I guarantee you, it's kind of like this will make it very real to everybody. Everybody who graduated from high school and had a reputation, whatever their reputation was by everybody at their high school, now think of yourself 5, 10, 20 years later. Guess what? Those people at high school remembered you from you at high school, not who you are today. It's the same concept of right now. Have people remember you the way you are right now by being kind and shining the spotlight on them, helping them achieve their dreams. Like, I know it sounds kind of hokey, but it will. Everyone at the senior level will notice this, and it matters. And then I would end with just being super thoughtful about your career. I get right now it's easy to get seduced with money. I hear it from my kids all the time, that someone's offered a purse or a car or a this or an extra $10,000 or $100,000 or whatever the number is. Don't be seduced by that. Like, this is where your mentor and your sponsor really comes into play, because you want to be, there's so many different ways to build a career, especially towards the CRO seat. It could be, have you done public companies? Have you done private companies? Have you done small ASP deals and large ASP deals? Have you done certain segments or horizontal apps or vertical apps? Like, there's so many different ways you can build it. The point is, be thoughtful about why you're making a change, and you're always running towards something. You're not running away from something. If anybody listening to this is thinking about changing jobs, or whenever you are going to think about changing jobs, because all of us will, make sure whenever you do change, don't run from something. You should be waking up every morning, want that job more than anything in the world. That's running towards it. So the mentorship and the sponsorship, again, will help you avoid doing it for the money, because I guarantee you there's more money to be made in your career longer term. Don't make a bad career decision for whatever X is. So that would be my advice.
What phenomenal advice that is. Thank you so much. There was so many really insightful nuggets of just pure brilliance, to be honest with you, from career advice to starting out to really propelling that career forward, being intentional, being considerate. Just fantastic. Kelly, thank you so much.
Karen, Esther, I'm so grateful to be invited. You guys have built a successful podcast, and GrowthQ is hugely successful. I'm excited to be associated with both of you. How about that?
Many thanks. We're so juiced and so honored that you took this time with us, because we've got some great work to do for the future CROs that are out there.
Absolutely. So, Kelly, on behalf of Esther and I, and of course all of our viewers, thank you again for joining us today. To our viewers and listeners, thank you so much. We hope to see you next time. In the meantime, please like, share and subscribe. And finally, a huge thank you to my co-host, Esther. Always a pleasure. Thank you so much. And thank you again, Kelly.